Hi, I'm Ami from Ami's Art. Welcome to this butterfly tutorial. This one is a beginner tutorial and it's just perfect to learn the basics of how to draw with colored pencils. You will learn how to layer, how to blend and how to mix colors properly. For this tutorial I'm using just a very limited color palette just to keep it simple. If you are already advanced with colored pencils, of course you can do this one as well just for fun. I won't use any special techniques such as scratching off pigments with a ceramic knife or indenting lines with an embossing tool. So all we need are just our pencils. If you know me already a bit, then you have seen that I'm working mainly with Faber-Castell Polychromos together with a few Derwent Lightfast and Caran d'Ache Luminance. I'm starting now with the first yellow orangey spot of our butterfly, applying one first layer with Polychromos light cadmium yellow. I'm applying this very first layer with just light pressure and I'm trying to apply color as even as possible. And first layer is done in one direction and second layer, you can see it now, is done in the opposite direction. This will help to achieve a smooth look. Next color is cadmium orange. I'm just layering with it with light pressure on top. And you will see it still looks a bit grainy. It's quite smooth, but it still looks grainy. And just by layering and layering, step by step, we will get rid of that grainy look. Next color is dark cadmium orange. And I'm applying it still with very light pressure around or basically next to the outlines of this spot. And you can see I'm applying this color in a way that are it's it's a kind of circles. The movement I'm doing with my hand is a kind of circles, and drawing in circles is a good way to apply colors as smooth as possible. So just to show you on a separate sheet of paper how I'm moving my hand, you can see these are circles and it looks quite even already. Whereas this, for example, is cross shading, which we did before with light cadmium yellow. So just another layer, and I'm trying to let this dark orange fade out into the middle yellowish part, which means we need a bit less pressure. Still adding more dark cadmium orange with a bit more pressure right now. You can see the more pressure I use, the darker I can go. And maybe you have seen it as well. The more pressure you use, the less grainy colors appear on the paper. We are now about halfway done, and on this stage I always love to blend my base layers together. Blending means pushing the pigments into the paper and creating a smooth and even texture. And we can achieve this by using a lighter color. I'm using now light cadmium yellow and just going over the whole section with medium to hard pressure. And you will see we can immediately get rid of all the graininess and it looks smooth and even now. And then I already added another layer on top, so after blending I'm adding more layers on top and maybe also more details, and I'm trying to create real depth after blending. So I just applied one layer of cadmium orange and now more dark cadmium orange goes in. After blending you always need a bit more pressure. I'm now starting with the second spot, so in the same way as we did the first one, just one layer of light cadmium yellow and then more oranges, and then again we are going to use the light cadmium yellow for blending, and then after blending more layers will go on top to add a few more details and to achieve real depth. If you have already watched other videos of mine, you know that I normally prefer to use Derwent Lightfast colors for blending. Derwent Lightfast colors have a softer and creamier core than Polychromos, and so they are able to blend the Polychromos beautifully. But in this case, I decided to stay with my Polychromos pencils for two reasons. It's easier if you're a beginner to stay just with one pencil brand and not to use different ones. And we also have very, very bright yellow and orangey tones, and we need such bright colors for blending as well. If we used the more subtle Derwent Lightfast pencils, for example, we would also tone down the brightness of these colors, and we don't want that in that case. For drawing fur instead, I always will prefer, I think, my Derwent Lightfast light colors for blending. But such bright yellows I don't have from the Lightfasts. Yeah, but it works also with the Polychromos. So I'm already about applying now more layers with dark cadmium orange again. And then I think we are ready for blending again with Polychromos light cadmium yellow, just to get rid of that graininess. So here it is, applying, just going over the whole section now with yeah, about medium to hard pressure right now. And then as before, I'm changing back to my previous pencils. I'm adding more layers with cadmium orange and dark cadmium orange. And as before, you now need a bit of pressure to get more pigments down after blending. Well, after having done now the first spots, you can see drawing with colored pencils really takes a lot of time, and it's very important to build up layers slowly and step by step. Otherwise, you won't get that realistic look. And yeah. We are now moving on to the next little spots. So we have a few more orangey yellowish ones, but if you have a closer look at the reference, you can see that these ones yeah, are a bit darker and not that bright. So we have more subtle colors, and this is because I'm now changing to a more subtle yellow, which is dark Naples ochre to do my first layer, and then I'm using cadmium orange as a second layer, and then as before dark cadmium orange next to the outlines on top. We still need to go darker and tone these spots a lot more down. So I think it's time to incorporate a much darker and yeah, also a little bit brownish color, which is Polychromos Nougat. Polychromos Nougat is a mixture of browns and yellows, and it's just perfect for getting some darker shadings in. And then I'm using dark Naples ochre now for blending these tiny spots with a bit more pressure. And then I keep on layering until I'm happy. Still a bit more nougat, so I'm going still a bit darker. Don't be afraid of going dark. if you haven't much down of one drawing, your drawing always looks a bit too, it seems to be too dark. But in the end, when you have more sections done and when all comes together, it doesn't look that dark in anymore. So this is a very common mistake of beginners, that they hesitate to go really dark to add real depth. Um, we move on now to the next spots, and these ones, yeah, are kind of apricot. And since polychromos don't have this color, we have to mix it. So first color that I'm applying is polychromos cream, a very light yellow. And then we are going to apply a bit of orange and a bit of pink. And this will, yeah, make a beautiful apricot color. Um, I don't want it to use other color pencil brands which certainly have these tones that we need on here. Yeah, because I wanted to keep it simple to use polychromos only, because I'm sure if you are a beginner then you won't have all those different brands of pencils. Yeah, so I'm already applying my next layer with cadmium orange, and you can see a few spots have a few lighter areas, and I'm just leaving them out. This is now a bit of coral or medium flesh as it was called before. But I immediately noticed it wasn't bright enough, so I'm changing to another color, which is pink metallic, and I think this one is much better. So you can see when I start a new drawing, I always have a few colors in mind which I think should work nicely together. But sometimes, yeah, they appear different on the paper than I have thought. And so it's always a kind of yeah, try and error and finding out which colors work best together. So this is just a very normal process. I'm using now Polychromos Nougat, and I'm adding a few of those darker details. So there's a bit of a darker line on that lower spot, and the yellow tones are also darker, bit more of pink madder lake. It's time for blending again, and again I'm using light cadmium yellow. Um, I'm not using Polychromos cream, which we have used as a base color now, because yeah, I felt like I needed to turn these spots to make them a little bit brighter, and so light cadmium yellow is definitely the better choice, because the cream is not as bright as the light cadmium yellow. And now I'm changing back to pink meadow lake, just adding another layer on top and a bit more of nougat, going a bit darker with those details. Tiny bit more pink meadow lake, but I think we're getting there. On to the next spots. I always just erase a bit my outlines because I did them quite dark, just in order to be able to provide a clear line drawing for you. Um, but I don't want these grayish lines to be seen anymore when applying my bright yellows and oranges, so it's better to erase them a bit. I'm using now Polychromos cream for the base layer of the next few spots, and also a tiny bit of light cadmium yellow, so you can see I'm using this for, yeah, this if you have a closer look at the reference, there's a very bright yellowish line in the upper spot, and so I used a bit of that color on here as well. But I'm working mainly with cream now, as the spots are less bright than the first one that we have drawn. There's another just very teeny tiny spot on here, which is a bit hidden behind the leaf. So just adding quickly that base layer on here as well. And then of course we need more layers as we did before. This is cadmium orange again. So we again have here a kind of apricot color, which we are going to mix with orange and a little bit of pink. And each spot is now divided in kind of two different colors. So first color is that apricot one, and the second one is a very brownish and dark yellow, which we are going to create with Polychromos Nougat. So here is Pink Meadow Lake now, just a bit on top of my orange layers. And always remember to let these, to create soft transition, to try to let the darker colors fade out into the lighter ones. And now here is Polychromos Nougat again, and I'm adding now these darker kind of lines and also the brownish yellowish parts of these spots. So on this spot we have a kind of a very bright yellowish stripe, which I'm just leaving out right now, and then going over this darker stripe now with a bit more pressure to go a tiny bit darker, and next to it I'm using less pressure because I don't want to go too dark on there. And so I'm just continuing now in the same way. Working now with pressure again, just to get this tiny area really dark. Finally, we are ready again for blending, And I'm using a bit of light cadmium yellow and cream. So whenever I feel light cadmium yellow turns my spots, makes them too bright, I'm just changing back to polychromos cream. So it should look now very smooth and even without any grains. And as always, I'm adding a few more layers after blending with still the same colors that we have used before. And of course, in case it looks a bit grainy again, after adding more layers now, you can always do some more blending work. There's no problem with it. So you can do as much blending work as you like, as is necessary for your drawing. You may see me also sometimes changing back to polychromos cream or light cadmium yellow, and this means that I'm just blending my final layers a tiny bit again. So final corrections on depth going in now with polychromos nougat. These spots are looking now quite dark, but trust me, once we add the black surrounding area, it won't look that dark anymore. It will be just perfect. I have already started now working on these tiny little white dots or spots, as you like. They seem to be white, but in reality they aren't really white. They have a subtle coloring. Some are more pinkish, and we also have a few very light blues and purples on these tiny spots. Um, but before we are continuing to work on these tiny dots, I think it's easier to do the black surrounding area first. Um, because once we have the darkest areas, the black areas in, it will be much easier to see the right values, to see on the subtle coloring of those almost white dots, and it will be also easier to see how dark we can go with all spots. um, in fact, adding the darks first sometimes is a good way to see the right values and to see on how dark you can go with the lighter areas. But in this case, I preferred to do the lighter areas, the brightest areas first, because once you add very dark and deep blacks with a lot of pressure, then you risk to smudge them, and that means that your brighter areas don't look that bright anymore. But what I'm doing now is adding one first base layer with Polychromos Stealth Blue. Adding a bright color as a base layer for black area makes black areas a bit more lifelike and less dull. If you have a closer look at the reference, you can also see those hidden purples under the black. Mainly on the border to the light dots, you can see those subtle purples. And in case of our butterfly, it's also very nice to have these purples next to the yellowish orangey spots because purple is complementary to yellow. And yeah, I really recommend you to yeah, have a look at color wheels and yeah, just type color wheel into Google, and you will find a lot of results regarding color theory. So it's really worth it. Yeah, taking the time and just studying a bit of this yeah, stuff. So complementary means that those two colors are able to push them to push each other to their maximum. I'm sorry, it's hard to explain. So if you put purple and yellow next to each other, each colors yeah, pushes the other one to the maximum, makes them appear yeah, just as bright as possible. It now will take your bit to draw around all these tiny spots. Just be patient and yeah, not to hit the white markings because it will be difficult afterwards to erase these layers. Just noticed that I forgot one little angle when I did my line drawing, so completing now the wing quickly, and I'm sketching it out with my pencil, with a pencil first, and then I'm coloring it immediately with Delft Blue. You can use also blue violet. These two colors are pretty similar, and it doesn't really matter. This is now Polychromos black, and now I'm just going over my purple base layer with I'd say um, medium to hard pressure already. So yeah, it should look now completely smooth. So we are doing this area now without blending, just by applying color with a lot of pressure. Just one quickly, there is one little um, lighter spot which I just did with beige red, bit of orange, And then I'm adding a few dots with black, and then I'm continuing to add the black area with a lot of pressure. So if you apply colors with a lot of pressure, you don't need any blending work, because then it doesn't look grainy. This is now Derwent Lightfast Arctic, which is an almost white pencil with a little bluish touch. And I just went over this white stripe, which we have next to that black area, and just went over my delft blue layer, and it looks immediately blended, and we immediately have that light purplish bluish color of this spot in. Yeah, and so I'm just continuing now with black again, and with lighter pressure I'm also adding a few strokes and kind of circles next to the outline of that orangey spot, just to create a soft transition from the black area into the bright yellowish orangey spot. So just drawing in circles again, and with light pressure only, because I don't want these circles to be too dark. So yeah, the black is basically fading out into this spot. Yeah, you can see this also very good at your reference. There is no hard outline. Yeah, the black goes over into the marking. So with more pressure again, I added the darker black line, and then next to the dark line I just added with light pressure a few circles. And then I'm going over these black circles with dark cadmium orange again, just to blend them and make them a bit smoother. And now just continuing to work on the black area, also defining a bit more the spots. Just forgot to add these tiny little yellowish spots, so just doing them quickly with one layer of dark naples, ochre, a bit of orange and nougat on top, and it's done already. So I used a bit more pressure, and then it looks blended immediately. There's another teeny tiny marking, so I just mapped it out with black and then filled it in quickly with nougat. It's a very dark one, so it's totally fine to use nougat only. So you can see sometimes, if possible, you can also draw with just one layer or two layer, as we are doing with the black area. If it works, if you can work with just a few layers, then just do it. Color pencils are known as a medium which requires a lot of layering, being patient. Yes, sometimes it seems that you always have to apply 100 layers, but it's not always necessary. You see, it works also sometimes with just one layer or two layer. I always say, if it's possible to do one area with just one layer, then do it. It will now take us a bit of time to get the whole black area in. So again, just be careful and patient. Dark cadmium orange again for blending my transitions. And now I'm using Polychromos Nougat to darken these two spots a bit more, also a bit tiny bit of black next to the outlines, just because you can see we have added now the very dark black area, and these spots immediately don't seem that dark anymore, and in fact we can still go a bit darker. If you watch me carefully, you can see that I'm making the outlines of the spots here a kind of frayed. So there's no straight outline. Yeah, it's just the outlines are a bit interrupted, and this makes these spots a bit more realistic. So this is basically the illusion of some textures on there. So here you can see it again. I'm adding a few tiny strokes that are overlapping the yellowish spots. So again, we don't have a straight outline here, but yeah, kind of frayed edges or corners. The wings are pretty much finished, so just this little section to do, and then we have the legs and the head left. Um, the legs are not just black only, so there are a few tiny lighter, yeah, lighter areas. And so I used a bit of the Ruben Light first to blend first the leg, and then I'm going over with black with the black pencil, but not everywhere. So I'm leaving out yeah, a kind of a lighter line. Um, it's really very teeny tiny. Um, but this will make it a bit more lifelike, and yeah, we also have yeah, a bit of light shining, reflecting on the legs. So basically there's a kind of a little lighter line on yeah, the upper side. Doing the same now with I don't know how they are called. These some feelers, I don't know. First blend it with a bit of Derwent Lightfast Arctic, and then adding a black line um, next to it, basically. And then the same is done with the hat now. So we have a few lighter, tiny areas on here, which I'm just blending with Arctic, and then filling in the darker sections with black. The hat is finished now, so just those tiny little white spots are left to do. But as I said before, they are not really white. So we have a few very very light and subtle colors on here. So first I added one layer of beige red. Even on here, also a bit to the middle part, and then a tiny bit of orange on top. So some spots also have a kind of yeah, a darker circle around the white middle, and this is what I'm trying to imitate right now, still using beige red. And after that I'm going to use even a hint of blue, because some of these spots are a little bit blue toned. So here it is. This is Polychromos sky blue. You can also use light ultramarine. These colors are pretty much the same. And again, I'm just drawing around the lightest middle part of these tiny dots. First a bit of beige red again. Seems to be a good combination. And then more sky blue. So we have a few spots which are just a bit blue toned, and others which are just a little bit pinkish, and others which have both colors. Sorry for the loud noise in the background. It seems that my cats are running wild a bit. Yeah. So I'm using sky blue right now again, and I'm just drawing yeah, around these spots in order to leave the middle part blank white, and it's done, I think. So these spots are really so teeny tiny, we don't have to put too much effort in them. Doing the same now with these teeny tiny spots of the hat. If it looks a bit grainy, you can easily use Derwent Lightfast Arctic again and do some quick blending work. If you smudge your outlines a tiny bit, it doesn't matter in this case. It just makes your outlines and your transitions a bit softer. Adding also some hits of blue-violet right now. But I think we are pretty much done now with the butterfly. So there's just that little plant to do. Decided to go over all spots again with Derwent Lightfast Arctic in order to smooth out transitions. You can hardly see that the difference on the video, but I hope you can see it on your drawing. So you can see when drawing animals, no matter if they have hairs or no hairs as our butterfly, it's important to keep transitions as soft as possible. And we hardly have any straight hard outlines, even if it may seem so. Final adjustations now with black, so just in case if there are any grains left, I'm just covering them right now. And a few more adjustations are going now in on my values. So that means I'm checking back if I already went dark enough with those brighter and lighter spots. And if I look at the reference, yeah, I can still go a bit darker. If you remember at the beginning when the black surrounding area wasn't down yet, it seemed to be too dark. But then immediately, suddenly, after the black areas are in, those areas now seem to be a bit too light, in fact. So, just correcting this now a tiny bit with a bit of pink metallic, nougat, and finally even black to push those darker lines in the spots. Using now even dark Naples ochre, and maybe light cadmium yellow is better. Bit more of nougat, still going a tiny bit darker. And if nougat is not dark enough, I'm just using a bit of black applied with just light pressure because I don't want it to be really black right now. Bit on here as well, bit more nougat, but I think we are almost there now. And finally softening out a bit my outlines, my transitions. Bit more of pink Madder Lake. Nougat, which tones the brighter colors down, and at the same time, yeah, darkens one area. So black, just correcting these fade outlines. And yeah, now let's do the plant, that little detail of a plant. So just erasing first again, and then we don't put too much. We keep it, I'm still keeping it quite simple. So I'm going to use just a very few colors, but yeah, it will work. If you don't have exactly the same colors, you can also use similar ones. So it doesn't have to be 100% as my drawing. If your colors are a bit different, it will look pretty as well. So this is just a practice piece. It's for us, and we don't strive for yeah, a drawing that is 100, that looks 100% as the reference. So my first layer is done with Polychromos light green, and I'm just applying it everywhere. So it's the same technique as before. We are starting with our base layers and then using now a bit more pressure because we can still go darker already. Yeah, so layering, 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 a bit of blending and then layering again and concentrating on values and yeah. But we hardly have any difficult details here, so it will be done quite quickly. Next color is permanent green. It's much darker than the previous one, you can see it. And I'm now adding the first shades. With a bit of pressure already, we don't need to hesitate. So, and the upper part is filled completely now with that color. It's one of the darkest parts of the plant, so we can apply immediately a darker layer. We can also start with light green, but it's not necessary as we need to go much darker on here, so it's totally fine to start out with a medium dark color immediately. This is another tiny leaf, and you can see I'm trying to leave out a few areas a tiny bit lighter. So this is what will turn the plant, what will make it look realistic. Behind the stem, I think we have two other hidden tiny leaves, and the darkest parts of these leaves is the upper part, whereas the lower part towards the end of the paper is a tiny bit lighter. So you can see that a little bit, but I'm still trying to keep transitions as soft as possible. And I'm now changing back to my previous pencil, which is light green, and I'm just going over my layers again in order to blend them. So again, in this case, I decided to use polychromos colors, very bright colors, in order for blending, in order not to lose the brightness of these colors. Now I'm using another still darker green, which is now pine green, and I'm continuing to shade the plant. So as I said before, the upper part needs to be quite dark, and I'm going in with quite a bit of pressure right now in order to cover the paper completely. Adding also a bit to that leaf, basically to the top end and next to the outlines. And then I'm trying to let it fade out softly, gently into the lighter middle part. And then a bit more on the next leaf, and the middle part is a bit lighter again. So just with lighter pressure in the lighter middle part, and then with a bit more pressure again on that area right now. And always trying to let it fade out into the lighter areas. doing the same on here. So the upper part is darker, and then I'm imitating a few long strokes of the leaves, which is the texture of the leaves. It looks pretty good already, but I think we can still work a tiny bit more on our values, and also to soften out pigments a bit more to get rid of the graininess. This is now Green Earth, which I'm using to go over and to blend a tiny bit, and at the same time to tone down a bit my very bright greens. Bit more of permanent green going in, so and earth green again for blending. Pine green. And this is dark sepia, which is basically a mixture of grays and browns, a very dark color, and it's just perfect for going still darker on that plant. And for blending, for softening out my dark sepia layers, I'm using a bit of permanent green. Bit more of dark sepia even on here. Still adding more dark sepia, if necessary, blend it with permanent green again. Bit more of pine green and dark sepia, just to darken the top end of these leaves, and then toning down the lower end with earth green, and adding a few more strokes which imitate the texture of the leaves again. But then I think we're finished. Final adjustations with dark sepia, so still going a tiny bit darker on here. Blending my dark sepia layers with pine green this time. So you can see always the same process. Going darker and then changing back to a lighter pencil in order to soften out the darker layers. This is now my kneadable eraser, and I'm using it to clean the white background. And I'm not sure if you can say it, but it works pretty good. Um, Regarding kneadable erasers, they are also very a lot of here different ones on the market, and you hardly know which one to take. But I can really recommend this one. It works very good. Um, this one is called I'll show it to you soon. It's a Honsel. I don't know. I think it's a Hollandaise name or German name. I'm not sure. Yeah, we are now finished with this butterfly drawing. I'm just doing some very last finishing touches. Basically, working a bit more on my values with black, just intensifying a bit the darkest areas. Also on the plant, but then it's finished. So I hope you enjoyed it so far and that you learned a lot. If you have any questions, of course, you're always welcome to contact me. I'm happy to help. So stay healthy and bye bye. See you on the next one.